everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How is your dystopia going, everyone? We won't get into that, though. Let's just get into the episode, because this is great. This is Mike Sweeney. And if you don't know who Mike is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Since childhood, Emmy-winning comedy writer Mike Sweeney wanted to be in showbiz, but family issues prevented him from pursuing stand-up until his late 20s. Stand-up led to writing on shows like Short Attention Span Theater and Politically Incorrect, and in 1995 he joined the writing staff of the then 2-year-old Late Night with Conan O'Brien. In 2002, should I try to read that? Late Night with Conan O'Brien. In 2002, Mike became the head writer for Conan and stayed with the show through its transition to The Tonight Show in 2009, and then after that to the TBS version of the show, which ended in 2020. Since then, Mike has stayed busy doing many things, among them working as the head writer for That's My Time with David Letterman, and as a producer on Conan Without Borders. Mike's really cool. I think I met him originally, although I don't think either of us remember this, back when I worked on Pete Holmes' talk show, which was produced by Team Coco. And one of the cool things was we got to go over and hang out behind the scenes when Conan was taping. But I met Mike more recently here when Naomi was on the David Letterman show on Netflix, I think last year. And then socially, I've seen him. And he's a super nice guy, and I want to talk to him. As I mentioned in this episode, I listened to his WTF appearance to get to prepare for this, and he had a very, I'm going to say interesting childhood, because that's a vague enough adjective, and you'll hear exactly what had happened. Or if you have listened to the WTF, really go listen to that in preparation for this, because I wasn't going to ask Mike to rehash everything that he talked about. It was a somewhat chaotic childhood, let's just say. But what I'm really interested in is, in a chaotic childhood, how do your ambitions, how does your existential self form? And we get into that and a lot of other stuff. Mike's a cool dude, so I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you do, what I like to do here in the beginning of the show is a little recommended if you like. If this is your first episode of Beginnings, why not check out other episodes? I've done this show for almost 14 years. I've talked to hundreds of writers and actors and comedians and musicians and artists and such. And so say you're like, okay, I came to this episode because I wanted to hear a talk with a late night comedy writer. Well, what about the other interviews I've done with late night folks? Brian Stack and John Glazer, both from Conan. Brian now writes on Colbert, and guess what? I've talked to Opus Moreski, who's the head writer of Colbert. Speaking of head writers, what about Elliot Kalin, the former head writer of The Daily Show? Actually, that was, I don't know, episode 10. I don't know. I wonder. I mean, Elliot's great. I wonder how I, and at that time, my writing partner were. Anyway, the point is, check out, why not, Roy Wood Jr. formerly from The Daily Show now. Probably one of the best stand-ups working at this moment. He's also been on the show. So check those out. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the show. You can leave a review if you want to. You can find me on social media, I suppose, at Andy Beckerman. Coming up next week, comics writer Matt Fraction, also one of the showrunners of the new Godzilla show on Apple TV. Matt's really cool, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's talk to Mike.
By everyone, I mean the one other podcast.
Besides your own, do you mean WTF?
Oh, I did do that, yes. That was fun. That was because I got to go to Mark Maron's new house that he had.
You got a free mug?
I don't think I got a mug.
No, Naomi got a mug.
Fuck. Now I'm angry.
You missed out.
I think the mugs were back ordered. It's not that I wasn't deserving of a mug. Damn it. I would have gone to his kitchen and stolen something, any type of mug, just to have a souvenir. No, I didn't get a T-shirt.
By the way, I didn't say you weren't deserving of one. I just said you didn't get one. You added that part to yourself.
Well, yes, that's my constant narrative. Someone has to say it. Okay. Hi.
You're a little bit older than me. I had a question for you.
Yes.
Is adulthood just careening from one crisis to another and just kind of triaging every moment, or is that just life in the 2020s?
No, that's adulthood.
Okay. So this is just for all history.
Yeah, I'm older than you. I can answer any questions you have about the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or early aughts and adulthood. Yes. No, there's moments that, well, I mean, I prefer careening. I'm not a good self-starter, so I need outside stimulus or I don't do anything. So
Yeah. No,
yeah,
I agree.
No, I know things are extra insane right now.
Well, our dog has, I mean, yes, everything is insane, but like
Right.
our dog, like in the microcosm, our dog has fleas. And
That's
so-
what I meant. The big picture was your dog with with fleas. Yeah, your dog has fleas.
Yeah. And so like like she's getting them outside somewhere. There's some place outside
Right.
and we keep
A
changing
source.
where, like trying to scientifically figure out, well, where is the place where she's getting them?
Right.
And we're getting closer, but it's still happening. And so
Wait, what do you mean you're getting closer? Like, how do you know you're getting close?
because we've like, okay, we no longer take, we have a little fourplex and there's a yard out front that we used to take her out in front of. So we're no longer taking her there. Just in case. So,
so you're eliminating. I see.
Yes.
You're eliminating. I see that. But
now-
and yet, okay.
yeah, no longer taking her south on the block. No longer,
Right.
and then hopefully we can figure out, unless it's just Los Feliz is flea covered at this point, in which case.
It might be. What if you're the source? What if the source is coming from inside the house?
I can't take that's a bridge too far. Then it's just emotional collapse.
Yes, you'd probably know if you had fleas. I'm sure it's not you. I never had a dog. Is that, do all dogs get fleas or is that a rare event?
Apparently, it's not that rare. We thought we were like, we've had Mabel for 4 years, and so we've never had this kind of problem before. And other dog owners are like, I can't believe you went 4 years without having fleas.
Really? Okay. Wow. Yeah. No, I didn't. I like the name Mabel. That's a good name.
Thank you.
Yes, but I would not name the fleas. That would be exhausting.
Yeah.
Well, wait. So you get rid of the fleas, and then they come back. Is the problem then they come back?
So she has flea medication. So basically, they bite her, and then they die about 4 hours later, roughly on average.
Oh, okay.
So it's the problem is we don't know they exist until we find a dead body on the ground.
Oh, are they that real? Oh, you can't just see it in the fur.
No, they're like they're basically, I don't know.
They're microscopic.
They're not. Yeah, they're like a few millimeters maybe at most.
Yes, but you do see them when the carcass on that's visible. Okay.
Yeah, so they're like hanging out on Mabel's fur. They bite her. They get the poison in them, and then the body falls off, and that's our first indication that there's a problem. And then you basically have to do a round of anything she's touched goes in the dryer in a high heat.
Right.
She gets washed. We have to comb through her fur. We have to vacuum the floor. Yeah, it's just this. It just initiates an entire. And so it's been for like over a week now. Periodically you find a body and you're like, well, I guess I'm going through this whole process again.
Can you keep her outside or something? Or
no, there's no way to. There's no. We don't have like our own yard. And even so, then she would just be getting more fleas.
Right.
Yeah.
I wish I could give you some flea advice. I have no idea.
That's okay.
Well, I'm sure you've asked all the experts.
Yeah, we took her to the vet. It's not so much that. It's more of the kind of like, I found out this year, like, Naomi and I got married in March, and the stress and all the planning of the wedding pushed a bunch of projects. And then we knew that the strike was looming, and we had to get a script in because we wanted to get paid for the first draft before the strike. So we rushed, got the first draft, and then the strike. So the stress of the strike, our cat died. Like it's just been like a whole bunch of things. And they keep, well, the thing is about these crises, and I'm curious, I brought this up in the first place, and I'll get to why in a second.
Well,
but
to interrupt, I'm worried that your wedding has been included in this string of crises.
No, the wedding was fantastic. It was
okay, good. It sounded like
was
the wedding, and then this, and then that, and the cat died, and I'm like, oh no.
It was the stress leading up to the wedding and dealing with family and stuff like that.
Of course.
Yeah.
You should have eloped. I would have happily planned an elopement for you two.
if we renew our vows, we'll do a renew our vows a local
Good,
check
good,
with you,
good,
and maybe
good.
you can recommend.
Yes. Well, it's just City Hall, really. It's pretty simple. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were. I interrupted you. You were going. All these crises.
They
It was
keep
leading you
pushing
somewhere.
things like whatever you're supposed to do, you have to now put off because you're dealing with a crisis.
Yes, exactly. And I often, because I'm a terrible procrastinator, I get excited. I dream of crises because then I'm like, oh well, I can't do the work I'm supposed to be doing. There's a crisis.
Okay, so
Right?
actually, do you see some kind of like bright side in a crisis where you're like,
Oh my
well,
God! A bright side. It's my bread and butter. I'm so excited it's like an excuse to put off all the stuff I feel like I'm supposed to be doing.
okay, the stuff that you're supposed to be doing, does that cause anxiety for you, and that's why you want to push it off?
Also, my level of crisis is the bar is really low. Like if I hear a story about a hit and run in La Crescenta, and it's like, shit, I've got to stop everything and find out where La Crescenta is. And then I want to learn about the history of I could eat up like 2 hours just learning about La Crescenta. and that to me is a mini crisis, but it's helped put off doing work. So it's perfect. What was your question?
Well, I've got a larger question, but
Yes.
this is interesting to me. What is it about the work where
Yes.
you are just like, what is it about it emotionally where you're like, I have to, go, I have to look on a map and then I have to read about
Right.
the population
Right.
data of La Crescenta and the median income.
And the whole time I'm doing it, this voice in my head is yelling at me, going, "What are you doing? What are you looking? It's like, you asshole. You're actually looking up La Crescenta instead of doing, all the stuff you have to do. So that's exhausting. If I knew the reason, because I bring it up to my therapist all the time. I've been working out for years. I wish I knew. I just have to, how you guys said, oh, we've got to get that script done before a strike to get paid. That's the kind of stimulus I respond to, which is someone tells me something is due. And then I'm like, okay. But when I tell myself something's due, it's I can always ask myself for an extension.
Yeah. No, that resonates with me. And I don't,
Sure.
for me, it's more like fear. The fear of like knowing that the first draft is always going to be bad. And I don't want to produce something bad. I want it to
Right.
come out immaculate. And I know it won't. And so there's a fear and there's a kind
Right.
of maybe disgust or something like that
Right.
mixed in there.
It's I think people call it that's that sense of perfectionism where you want some, like I get that way with like text. I'm like, shit, this text, this 3-word text isn't good enough. And then I put it aside and then it's just crazy. But you could do that on any level, but it is that sense of like, oh, this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. And it is a way to just put off taking action on things, right? Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you do? What did you do in your case with here you had a first draft and we won't even get into you're collaborating with your partner on it, which also is a whole different kettle of fish. But did you both get to a point where you were like, okay, this draft's good enough to send in, or how did that resolve itself?
Yeah. Well, we wrote it until,
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a weird thing. And I don't know if you deal with this, but having like the emotional knowledge of something and the intellectual knowledge of something, and
Right.
the two don't really affect each other. And I know the intellectual knowledge of writing is that it probably won't be good until about the third draft.
Right.
And I know that like I've been doing this long enough that I can write a decent first draft. It's still funny and I'm getting at some of the ideas. And then every new draft, I'm going to like tuck the emotions in, and they're not going to be saying the things that you're not going to be saying their emotions outright. And now I'm going to find the way that emotion comes out with a sentence that hides it and that stuff. And I'm going to keep tucking that stuff in there and figure out all the plot holes and all that stuff by draft 3 about. And I know that intellectually, but emotionally it doesn't. I can't.
It's hard. Right. And it's a slog. I mean, part of it's just the mental slog of it. Like, even though okay, I mean, I think that's great if you have the knowledge, like, oh, the third one will be I just have to get to the third one and work through to the third one. But it's still the actual mental wear and tear of doing it is kind of like, it's hard work.
Yeah. But do you have that perfectionism thing? Is that part of you?
No, I wish I had. No, no, I've never tried to do anything well, and it's really served me very. I think more like when I've read about procrastination and they bring that up, I'm like, oh, I think it's the that fear of something not being good enough. I think it's more the fear of rejection or someone going. So if that's another way to restate the perfectionism idea, but I think it's more insecurity, right? Of just, what if I hand this in and nobody likes it? But yeah, you just have to get over that. That's why deadlines really help for me, because like when a gun's to my head, then you just have to get it done. And also I always just work better when I have a deadline. Because you know what I think? Because then I don't have to overthink all that, the stuff you're talking about. Like, is it good enough, or what will someone reject it? You're just literally like, I've got to do it, and then you get rid of all that sidebarring in your brain.
Yeah, I mean, I asked some of these questions because I went back and I listened to your WTF actually before.
Oh, hey, that's two people.
And
I'm
I
cutting myself during it. Well, okay.
I heard it when it was on originally, and I kind of just like it just went out of my head, and then I went back and was like, "Oh, right," because you kind of had a chaotic childhood.
Yeah, that's the first time I ever talked about it, and it was strange for me to do that because I've never talked about that in public really. So that was. I was kind of, when I walked out of there, I was like, oh God, what have I just done? But I had a chaotic childhood. It was a bit crazy. So,
yeah.
But he kind of gets into, and I think you do too, obviously on this podcast, kind of the early formative years of all the people you talk to.
Yeah. And I'm not asking you to rehash it just because, for prurient interest. It's more of, I'm kind of curious if, just a brief overview. Your mom had DID, is that right?
Yeah, it's called, it used to be, I liked multiple personality disorder much better, which is what it was called in the 60s and 70s. And then they renamed it to dissociative identity disorder, right. Which, that's what she had. And she finally was seen by a doctor late in her life, and they said, "Oh, she's got like a whole menu of items, things wrong with her," which was exciting to hear.
And I'm curious about this stuff because I'm curious about how did you form in the soup, especially creatively,
right?
Because if it's so chaotic. Also, I think you said your dad was an alcoholic, so there's a lot of like kind of
sure. Yeah, no, it was an insane childhood. But I mean, at the time, as a kid, I always thought it was kind of cinematic, and I thought, oh, I'm kind of like in a movie, because she was literally like, I remember seeing the movie Carrie and going, and at the end, like Piper Laurie goes crazy and starts pulling butcher knives, and it's like that would happen in my house, kind of without warning, where a switch would flip and you'd be running. Being chased around the house, with a butcher knife. So, you just kind of get that's just was kind of the norm. So it would happen like every month or every other month, and so I think the way I dealt with it was like, oh, I'm in a movie. I'm in a movie, and I was like, well, this is exciting. I don't know how it's going to end.
Wait, is that how you actually conceived of it when you were younger? Like you're
yes. I remember thinking like, oh, this is like an exciting movie I'm in. And I think that's how I dealt with it.
About how old were you when you kind of came to that realization?
Like 10 and 11.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, because you know what? No, like both my parents were estranged from their family, and my mother's crazy, so no one wanted anything to do. No one wanted anything to do with her. So we were it was just my sisters and I and my crazy mother. And then my father really was MIA the whole time. And yeah, there was like, all that thing of like people coming to help you no one ever showed up. So we're kind of on our own.
Did you have friends? Did you have like outlets for this? Or was it all contained in your head?
All contained. Cause I was raised, I guess, looking back, I mean, I had no sense of being like Irish. I was just raised American, but in hindsight, I feel like it's sort of an Irish thing where you don't talk about what happens behind your door. So I never told anyone any of this till I was 26, and I moved into New York City when I lived at home till I was 26, and then I told my girlfriend, and I literally thought the ceiling was going to cave in because I'd been trained that you never talk about what happened. So I never told anyone till then. But in terms of affecting you creatively, I mean, I don't know. You look at people who go, or people in comedy. I know a lot of times it's a idea that everyone's got a miserable childhood, but I don't think that's always the case. I think sometimes it's just genetics, like you're predisposed to maybe go into comedy. I don't know. I don't know what your experience is, because you've kind of been tracking this down, I think, with a lot of different people. So do you have a consensus on it?
My theory is that there's a lot of different factors that kind of nudge you in different directions. And one of the big ones is being othered, is feeling other in some way.
Yeah.
Whether that is because of your identity, because of, I guess, something familial in some case.
Right.
And that pries you apart, especially if you're doing comedy. It pries you apart from other people and gives you the space to look at things from a distance and start commenting on them in a way that you wouldn't have if you were part of the group in a larger way.
I think that really, that sounds really accurate. It's the othering, or the feeling othered, where you kind of do feel off by yourself. I think that all sounds true. Yeah.
And then a void somehow gets created in you. And so if you want to do this in a way where you need to get praise for it, because I think the difference is, and I ask this question a lot, is to people, okay, well, you're doing this professionally. You're sharing this. You could have not. You could have written songs, or you could have written a book or whatever and put it in a drawer. There's a lot of people that do that. And then they're done with it and they don't feel like they need to share it. So there's something in a person that makes them want to connect with other people. I think that's what I mean by a void, is really I don't really mean it like it's, I mean, I envision
I know
myself.
What you mean.
But that it sucks in praise because it's unending. But also there is I think the other half of it is a need to connect. Is there something that's missing? And so you need to connect with other people to find that thing.
But also all those things you mentioned, like music, comedy, and writing a book, are literally expressly made for other people. It's like cooking a meal, it's for other people to experience. So you kind of have to get that feedback to, I would think, although there's painters who like crazy, was it Jeffrey Darger, like that crazy artist from the 30s, who I think just did reams and reams of paintings in his apartment and no one ever saw them. So I guess it's not always the case, but I think with music, and comedy, you kind of need to do them for somebody, or they almost don't exist.
But Darger didn't have the void, I think. If he didn't share it, then the void wasn't there. There wasn't the need to connect with other people. It was just the need to make, to create.
Right. Yeah. No, that's it. Oh, well, painters, I don't know if you've talked to a lot of painters, but I mean, some of them, they just have to paint 7 days a week, which is clearly, it does seem like it's almost for themselves, almost more than, I mean, there's some sort of void there, but the idea of it, although I'm sure their motivation is eventually like, I did 10 paintings and now I can, trot them out and people can check them out. So I guess it's the same. Yeah. I guess I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well,
once again,
did a void form in you? Did you need knowing like,
right.
I mean, I formed as someone who needed parental approval, but maybe
right.
you didn't.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yes. Everyone, don't you think everyone wants parental approval, but then you get to an age where yeah,
maybe. I don't know, but to me, it seems like you weren't going to get that from your parents. So did you seek it out somewhere else, or did you just not need it?
No, I got parental. My mother, when she wasn't having episodes, was actually great to hang out with. So it was kind of a schizophrenic experience, but it was a classic thing where like, and also as a survival mechanism was to make her laugh. Cause like if she's laughing, she's not attacking. So I was very thinking about it now. I was very motivated to try to crack her up all the time. And so then when she went crazy, I could be like, hey, I made you laugh 10 minutes ago before you grab that knife. Maybe go after my sisters before you come after this guy. So, yeah, in that sense, I definitely was that thing. And I was like always trying to get laughs in school, like in class. Oh, that was always a thing since I was a little kid. It was just since I can remember, since I was like 5. Like, being an asshole, a wise ass in class.
Yes.
That's all I cared about, really. And like any time I had a writing assignment, I would try to make it funny. Like that was and that's the only time I was happy in school. I enjoyed school, but those are the things I remember.
Was that reinforced by teachers? Like, did they appreciate it?
Yeah. Oh, usually. Yes. Teachers I always felt like I was always, yeah. I never felt like I had to fight anyone I'd get in trouble sometimes. Like I have to write 500 times. I will not talk in class a lot. So I remember once I had to do that and I went and figured out how to write it in shorthand and did the whole thing in shorthand, which took, since I wasn't fluent in shorthand and I was in 6th grade, it took me like 20 times longer to do it.
Wait, they made... Like I learned shorthand. I was like the last class of people to learn shorthand for some reason.
Shorthand?
I still remember a little bit of it, but like,
wow.
I don't think I could take notes in it. But I just remember there were things like a capital T is a TH, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, no, I never learned shorthand.
But they made you do it in shorthand?
No, they made me write, I will not speak in class 500 times. And I thought it would be funny if I handed it in shorthand, like I cheated as a bit. But it took me forever because I had to research it. And then I was like, I don't really know how to write shorthand. So I was like, fuck, this is like, I think 100 I will not talk in classes in shorthand with 400 to go. I was like, fuck, what do I do? Do I bail? But I just was like, no, I got to do it. I commit to the bit.
So early on, you were committing to it.
Yeah. That was like 6th grade. And I was like, I gotta commit to this. I gotta go see it through.
Okay. This is an interesting dynamic. As someone who's self-proclaimed procrastinator who needs a deadline.
Right.
You still, once you committed to an act, what I'm going to do, then you're just off like a rocket.
If I have an idea I like, then I'm the most motivated then I'm like, it's got to be, then I'm very hands-on and it's got to be just right.
I mean, you seem like a very even-keeled person. Is that from growing up in chaos that you needed to kind of just be as still as possible? And again, we've only had like a handful of conversations, so maybe outside of those conversations, you're not, but
of course, yeah. It's only because there's a microphone here, and I'm trying to act normal. I try to be even keeled. I don't know. Sure. What was the question? I'm not even keeled. I don't even know what your question was. I mean, sometimes you know what? Working on the Conan show, that was crazy. That was extreme pressure every day. But it was good. It was good training because it was like putting out a newspaper every day. Because every day at 5 p.m. that show had to go on the air. So it was fun when new writers came on, and they were kind of like, "Wait, what have I just signed up for?" Because it would take a few months to get the hang of it. So I think that certainly would help with your even having an even keel, because you just have to get used to being productive on a daily basis. And yeah, I think that has spilled over into other things.
But before you started working at Conehead, you were not even keeled.
Oh yeah, no, I think I was, I did stand-up comedy for 9 years, and I was always just like, I weirdly went into it philosophically, like right away, like, oh, I'm running my own race, and I'm not going to flip out about how everyone else is doing around me. And because a lot of comics I started out with were like, oh, you got a earlier spot than I did. And I was like, oh man, I can't get in. But I for some people, that sort of level of competitiveness is rocket fuel. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's different. I just the idea of getting that thin-skinned about every little aspect and being that uber competitive didn't seem like would be healthy for me. So I was more even keeled in that way. I compared to some other comedians I knew. And that, you have to be even keeled with that, because that job's brutal. There's just that maxim, "you're good as your last show," is absolutely true. So
yeah,
like Friday night, the second show is notoriously awful because everyone's drunk and exhausted from working all week, and the audience is, as a rule, if you could ask anyone, kind of blow. So you'd go home Friday night, like you'd have a great early show, but then you go on at 1 a.m. and it's kind of sucks, and you're depressed till Saturday night. So you kind of have to take it all. Yeah, take the good with the bad.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes a while. Like I remember when I first started doing like improv, and I would have a bad set and then go sulk out back behind.
Yeah,
under St. Mark's.
Yeah,
whatever venue.
Right. Oh no. Oh yeah. No. It's like there's just, if you have a bad show. I had a horrible. I did. There was a boat. It was two high school proms rented out this boat that went up the East River, and I did a show on there, and it went terribly. And I was like, okay, what? When is this boat docking? And they're like, oh, it's booked for 3 more hours. It's just going to go up and down the East River. And I was like, no, I have to get off this boat. You don't understand. So I was thinking of literally jumping off it and swimming to shore, because when you have a bad show, you need to get away.
Yes, I know.
And
that
you
feeling.
need to be. So I think I ended up in the engine room, and I was like making small talk, like, so how many? What's the horsepower on this? And they're like, ugh, we heard about you. You bombed. Go back up on the upper deck.
So wait, when you were growing up, were you even keeled at all? Like I guess. I'm wondering where the transformation is.
To transformate. What do you mean? Which transformation? To what?
Into being a somewhat, because you come off at the very least as emotionally stable.
Oh.
And growing up in such chaos, I assume you either respond to it then and become emotional. And
that's what happened. I think that's just a calming. I mean, I'm actually more anxious when things are normal and quiet, and I kind of relax when things are crazy. So I think that's why I liked working like on a daily TV show, because it was crazy and it was insane. And I was like, oh, okay, and it was constant series of crises all the time, mini crises that would always resolve. But you're engaged in that kind of low level crisis mode. So I think that's when I'm kind of more, others would tell you I'm not so comfortable, but I would kind of feel like, oh yeah, this is more my speed than just chilling out and quietly reading a book.
Because I guess I'm imagining that as like a sniper in a war movie who is just like a cool customer, like the chaos around them. And they have to be such a cool customer just to take the shot or whatever.
Oh man, that's not me at all. I've given off a totally wrong. You got the wrong guy. No, I would not. I would get nervous about loading the gun. I would probably end up killing 3 of my own people and then figuring out how to cover it up so I'm not discovered.
Okay, this makes more sense. So then in this kind of the soup of your childhood, how did your ambition form? Or did you have any ambition then? Or was it just got to get to next week or got to get to tomorrow?
Well, it's funny. I mean, my ambition really had to sit it out for a while because I think since I was very little, I wanted to, like, I just had some weird, vague sense of like, oh, maybe I'm going to be in show business someday, as dumb as that is. But there's no concrete thought about it until, I read, like, it was my father's alumni magazine that he got, like, I think everyone has something that kind of like clarifies things for them. And it was, my father went to Notre Dame and got, for some reason, I was probably procrastinating, avoiding doing work as my version of reading about La Crescenta at the time. I said, I'll read this alumni magazine. But there was an article about Jimmy Brogan, who was a stand-up comic who went to Notre Dame. And it was just at the time, he was literally just doing stand-up at the Improv in New York. So this was like 1975 or 76. And like just a coin dropped, and I was like, "Oh, this is what I want to do." Like, and here's a way to do it. Here's a way to try and see if you can write comedy and perform it, and that just seemed like a concrete way to proceed that I didn't know existed. I didn't know of these clubs where you could go in and try to break in. I had only seen comedians on TV and had no sense of how they got there. And so then I jumped right on it and went to college and then 3 years of law school and then worked as a lawyer for 3 years. And after, After those 9 years, then I started to do stand-up comedy. So I put it off for 9 years. I'm a procrastinator.
Well, that's the thing. Did you actually put it off, or was it like, did you know, like, this is what I want, and you specifically put it off, or was it that you were still trying to figure it out through those 9 years?
No, I did in college. I went to Catch a Rising Star. They used to have an audition night, and you waited out all day for a number, and I did it, and it went great. And then I went back a month later, did it again, bombed terribly, and said, "Oh, this is harder than I thought." And then, it sounds awful, but I was kind of talked into going to law school by my mother, who I will say, let's just say, I had a little Stockholm syndrome with her where, my sisters and I kind of did what she told us to do because we were scared all the time. So that included, in my case, going to law school. But in hindsight, and then when I got out, I was broke, and I was a trial lawyer for 3 years in New York City. And I look back and go, what was wrong with me? Why didn't I just, not go to law school or quit? I know comics who started law school and they're like, well, no, I want to do comedy. And they quit. And I don't know why I didn't quit. I don't know. I'm a mental case. So I wait. So I'd put myself up there in the angry young man. By the time I was 28, I was so mad I had wasted a decade doing the law and incurring law school loans that it took me 20 years to pay off. So I was very angry at myself, but now it's all water under the bridge.
No, this is very familiar. This is kind of what happened to me. Like, I went to grad school. I was a philosophy professor before I.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So you went to grad school for philosophy, I assume.
Yeah.
But so that whole time, were you like, I want to do, or I'm going to do something else, or were you trying to figure it out?
I was in a sketch duo with my friend
Okay.
Mark. We started writing scripts. We didn't know how any of this happened. And this was the mid-aughts. So there was more information for us, but we still didn't know how you went from, I was in Pittsburgh at the very beginning of when we started writing together. And then we didn't know how does this happen? How does it go from us being a sketch duo to us being Mr. Show, to us being Bob and David?
Right. Well,
that's what we want it to be.
Do you think part of it is as simple as the geography of it? Like,
yes,
literally
100%.
being in Pittsburgh versus Chicago, New York, or LA.
Yes.
Although I bet you there were outlets for you in Pittsburgh.
No.
No. Okay. No, I don't know. Carnegie Mellon didn't have it. Run an improv show. Okay, so
there was like one. There were like they did like comedy sports.
Right.
There was one place.
But so did you have a sense? Oh, I need to move, like maybe to Chicago or New York or something.
New York. It was definitely like, and also like my family's from New York originally, so that there was definitely a pull. I had family there. There was something, but I couldn't get out. And this is what I'm curious a little bit about for you is I couldn't get out from under my parents' desires and what they had told me I needed to do to have a happy life.
I was in the exact same situation where, it's the exact same scenario. And I think it's very common. I wonder if it's as common now or if parents are more accepting of people going into all kind of, say, less conventional occupations. Not that improv is considered less conventional these days, but yeah, okay, so there you go. Yeah, you were kind of, isn't it crazy how powerful your parents can be?
Yeah.
and you don't know until you're out of that gravitational pull and go, oh, why did I finish? But I would argue that, yes, you got your master's in philosophy and you taught, and all that stuff, I think, informs everything you do. And now, do you have any regrets now? Or do you feel like, oh, you know what? I'm really glad I did that additional teaching and studying, and that it helps you with everything else you do now, creatively.
In terms of my life, no, I don't have regrets because I would never have met Naomi if I hadn't done that.
Right.
And I think I'm a better person for having done that. And I a much better understanding of how the world works.
I'm only talking about creatively.
Yes. However, here's the thing, and I'm curious if this is the same for you. I feel like a man at a time because I was inspired by Bob and David, by Kids in the Hall, and by Strangers with Candy. Those are my big three.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other people that were inspired by that went and did comedy while I was at grad school.
Right.
And so by the time I went to do comedy, yeah, some people had seen Mr. Show, but most people had not and had been inspired by something else. So but when I'm going to do the kind of stuff I'm interested in, no one else is interested in at this point.
Right. Oh, yeah. So you felt like you were getting a late start, or you literally felt out of phase, out of rhythm. That's interesting. Was it that much of a difference? Just
yes.
In terms of what I mean, it's one thing having the vocabulary of what shows you liked and what influenced you. Are you talking about on that level, or literally
style? Like style and
style.
Kind of like by the time I got there, and I love Tim and Eric, but like that kind of style started to take over.
Right. It was that which is a little different, and so maybe you were kind of like almost like I don't like this as much because it might be that basic. I mean, so much. Same thing with music, like just the music you hear during those formative years it just carries you through for years and years. It's crazy. Yeah. And I think it's hard to change it or reopen all those neural grooves, as you get older.
Yeah. Or just like my peers were
Right.
like the people my age
Right.
were higher up on the totem
Yeah.
pole at like UCB than me.
Right.
Whereas my peers were all, in 101 or whatever, were all like 5, 6, 7 years younger than me.
Right.
So,
Right.
So so it creates this weird dynamic where I'm like, well, I'm older than all of you, but at the same time, and I'm wondering, was that similar for you?
For me, I started doing I was like doing trials during the day in downtown Manhattan, and then I started doing stand-up at night once I moved into New York City. And once I was making $50 a week doing stand-up, I quit my law job. Like, I never looked back. So, I mean, that was very simple to me. But I was so excited when I started doing stand-up comedy. I was like, oh, finally, I'm with people, like I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like, I just loved every comedian I met. Well, most of them. And no, but in terms, like I love, like I'd be doing one-nighters in Jersey, and I'd be in the car with like someone, who was like had an economics degree, someone who had done time in jail, someone who was in a rock band in England for 5 years before they went into comedy, and boom, all these people are in this little car, leaving the Improv in New York, driving out to Jersey, but we all had the same purpose, and I just I loved every aspect of it, and I felt so the age to me was not an issue at all, and I never felt. I mean, sure, they're different. I don't know. I felt like they're different. Types of stand-up, like some people, use props or they play guitar, and then some comics would be like shit on the comics who did that, and I was always like, I never understood that. I was like, I always felt like, worry about yourself and how you're doing, and who cares what anyone else is doing. That's not that's not your business. So yeah, I was mad at myself again for what I thought was blowing 8 years and starting so late in life. But once I was doing it, I just loved it. And I just felt, I felt like we're all on the same team. Like I didn't like there were comics who would shit on other comics on stage, like make fun of don't make me bring the last guy up or something like that. I was just always like, oh, well, no, I could never, like, you can't do that because we're all on the same.
Yeah.
We're all on the same team. So I always felt that kind of camaraderie, and I just loved all the different personalities, and it was just fun. I loved it.
Is that something you were? I mean, this is just so psychologically basic, but do you think it's something you were missing, that camaraderie when you were younger, that you finally found?
No, I think okay, being in law school. I was like, oh, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not supposed to be here. I don't belong here. Being a lawyer, I worked with really funny. All my jobs, I always work with really funny people. Like I was a post office job in college, and everyone there was so goddamn funny. And I felt like, I always felt like it wasn't an accident. But I almost felt like I was. You know how you try to give importance or look for signs, and I'm like, oh, I'm with these funny mailmen. It's a sign, to keep going in that direction. But I worked at this shitty insurance office law firm, so it was like kind of a ragtag collection of attorneys. They were all really smart, but they were all really funny, and I was like, it was kind of fun. But it still wasn't what I wanted to do. So then when I was finally doing stand up, I was like, oh yes, this is my crew. I just loved it.
Do you think you settled as a person when you finally started doing the thing you wanted to do?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it was hard and awful. There were highs and lows. I never, there's so many comics I know who are like, I'm going to get a show. I'm going to do a sitcom. Like they had and I was like, I just like doing I couldn't believe I was making my living doing stand-up comedy. Like that to me was the be all and end all. I was doing pretty well, and I worked like I do like 6 shows a night in different clubs in Manhattan, and I did it 7 nights a week until I got married, and then I cut it back to 6, and I was like, this is great. So, but you know what? I got married, and then we had a baby, and I was like, oh, I need to make more money. So, and I didn't feel like the stand-up was like, I was doing well, but I wasn't like, I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to be a big stand-up comedy star, or I'd have to work harder at it. I was kind of lazy.
Did that matter to you? That like when you had that thought, you're like, oh, I'm not going to be whatever Seinfeld or something like that. Did you care?
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, you want to do. Yeah, I'm sure it bothered me. I'm sure it bothered me a lot. But I was very undisciplined about writing, and then I like to ad-lib with the audience a lot. So then I'd lean into that, and so a lot of my act was ad-libbing with the audience. But then when I'd have an audition for like the Letterman show or something, I'd have material, but it wasn't like my real bread and butter, and I'd feel a little stifled and self-conscious auditioning. But I also think I leaned into the ad-libbing with the audience a little bit out of laziness of not being disciplined enough to sit down and just keep pumping out material. So I don't know. You know what? A lot of people I know were like getting some writing gigs, and I leaned into doing that, looking for those jobs. So I was still doing stand-up, and I loved when I always loved late night TV. I never cared about sitcoms, but I loved late night television, and getting a late night job was that was a dream come true, and I loved it. And I didn't care about. I did the warm up at the Conan show for 5 years when I started there, so I was still getting to perform every night, and I would just ad lib with the audience for 10 minutes and bring Conan out. But so that was fun. I was still getting to perform, and I was doing the writing gig, but I didn't care about being on camera or any of that. I enjoyed kind of being behind the scenes more than I'd ever imagined. I loved that. So that part wasn't disappointing at all. It was very fulfilling.
What was it about showbiz when you were a kid that was appealing? Was it just this is showbiz, or was there something else about it where you're like, I could do this professionally, or like what was going on in your head?
You mean when I was a little kid?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I don't know. I was like a big ham, and when I was really little, and I don't know why I had those delusions. That never happened. But I did have some weird. I remember a vague sense of like, I'm gonna be in show business. That's all. It was that, and being funny, I think, in some capacity. So that always was there. But I don't know about you growing up, but I was very embarrassed to even say it out loud. Like, I'm embarrassed saying that to you now, and I was certainly embarrassed when I was younger, and then in school, the idea of saying, "Hey, I think I can do this." Like, I just feel like people would be like, "Oh, fuck you! You what are you talking about?" So, I didn't even feel, back then, I guess in the mid '70s, that was a legitimate desire to have. To want to go into show business, or it was embarrassing to articulate. So I think that I also pushed it aside for those reasons. I don't know if you had that.
Well, no, I didn't even know I didn't know that's what I wanted to do. It was so it was so buried in me that when I got to college and I formed a band with my friend Kyle.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. Make things.
Right.
That was the spark. But up till then, I thought I was going to be a physicist.
Oh, I thought when you were 5, you dreamed of philosophy. But
No,
You wanted
that was an accident too. I took a course on existentialism in my first semester. Fell in love with it. And I was like, well, I guess I'll do. Again, I my whole up until I left grad school and moved to New York, my whole thing was just like, here's my parents' desires. I don't even know what my desires are, but I'm going to try to find some kind of like happy medium between those two. And I guess philosophy professor.
Wait, so is there a physicist in your family or scientists? No,
I was just good at science. I liked it.
What do your parents do, or what do they do?
My dad, before he retired, was an accountant at a university, head of student accounting, and my mom, before she retired, was a high school English teacher.
Oh wow. Okay.
But I think the thing I saw in them, I think this is one of the things that pushed me away was that, and I don't know how you felt about this when you were a kid, but like they didn't really like their jobs. My dad liked accounting, and my mom liked, my dad was just a vague businessman in quotes before he became an accountant. And my mom loves Shakespeare, but she, it was a thankless job being a high school English teacher mostly.
Sure. I would imagine.
And I think I saw that dissatisfaction, or I think I smelled it on them.
That's interesting. Now you're reminding me that I, for a while, wanted to do what my father did up till I was like 8. He was a doctor. So when I was 6, like I learned my anatomy, and I was just like, well, I'm going to grow. And I really enjoyed sciences, and I enjoyed, anatomy. I love all that stuff. But then when I was 8, I was just like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And then it was just show business, baby.
Do you remember what it was that turned you off of it, or was it just naturally it kind of wore the field
very natural.
wore off?
Yeah, by second grade. No, but yeah, literally by second, I was just like, oh yeah, no, that's not what I want to actually do. That sounds hard. So it sounds too hard. Damn it!
Look, again, this is what I'm about to say is very psychologically basic, but like your childhood, it seems very rough, and it seems like you had a lot of stuff to deal with there. It seems like you would want to find a path that was slightly easier because you had so much of your energy was dealing with your mom.
Oh, that's funny. No, I mean that's interesting. No, I never actually ever thought, I want to do something easy. Because I was always I worked hard in school, I think, always. Like I never cut class, and I was and so, yeah, no, I never technically wanted to do anything easy. I was always into doing something hard, but doing it poorly.
I mean, what was your life like outside of your home? Did you go hang out places? Were you like doing?
As a teen?
Yeah.
Ugh. I basically was my mother's husband. Like my sisters moved out. I was a baby. My father was gone, and I was her companion. Like I was like writing the bills every month. I took care of the house. I fixed things in the house. I didn't do anything. I mean, my friends would call me to do things, and I'd be like, I can't go, or I just wouldn't answer the phone. And like, if people came to the door and rang, sometimes friends would just come and ring the bell, and like, we'd all be hiding in the house and not answer the door. So, but I mean, I had friends in school, and I had some friends like I play sports with and things like that, down by the town fields. And so, but I never went out at all much until I got a girlfriend. Once I had a car and I was a senior in high school, I think I had a really normal. But I don't you think it's normal for most kids? Like until you have a car, like what I don't know. I never went anywhere, but I was definitely kind of under my mother's. Like, yeah, I need you here, and so it was fucked up.
Yeah,
it was. It was a little messed up, but once my senior year of high school, and I had a car, and then I made a lot of new friends my senior year in high school, and just kind of I remember a really normal year. But then I commuted to college, and I commuted to law school, and basically was my mother's partner for those 7 years, and it was rough.
How aware of this were you when you were when this was happening? Were you just reacting, or were you just like, oh my God, I'm basically like her?
Yeah, no. By the time, I mean, when you're a teen, but once my sisters moved out and then I was in college, by the time I was 20, I was like, this is really damaging me. It was damaging me because I hated her so much. I would go to bed every night just dreaming she would die. So, like if she went out for the night, I'd be like, oh, please. Like I'd be so angry when her car came. I mean, I'm just being honest. I'd be mad when her car came down the driveway, and I'd be lying in bed fantasizing the cops are going to come and say, the terrible car accident. And it never happened. So, no, I was like, oh, this isn't good. And it got worse and worse because she, would really lash out and do insane stuff. And it was just really, I can't even go into all of it, but it's just, it was, damaging. So, yeah. So I said, I'm only going to do this till I'm 26. I lived home till I was 26. Madness. But it's funny. Yeah. Like I think the older I got, towards the, working late night, all the writers were younger than me, like basically a good decade younger than me. And I always told myself, well, I started my career in comedy a decade later. So I just felt like I was on the same where I should be if you subtract the 10 years that disappeared. So it all worked out. So now I'm but when I was 29, very angry.
Okay. That's yes, I get that.
Yeah.
I mean, for different reasons, but because I think some of this stuff is like very existential. Like it's like you're frustrated from your life. It doesn't seem like you have a lot of outlet. I mean, you told your girlfriend, but like, I don't know. Did you ever get in therapy? Like at what point?
Yes.
Do you
I started going to therapy then.
Yeah.
And that was just being able to talk, get all that out, and that, yes, is very therapeutic. I feel like, I can just talk to you about it. So it's like, it's not a big deal. Although, you know what? I still feel like for a long time, I don't talk about it a lot. And the times where I do talk about it, I always feel like I definitely feel, especially now, don't you feel like with all this trauma and everything, I think people talk too much about stuff that's happened to them. And I kind of pining for the old days where everyone's like Clint Eastwood and you don't really, it's like, you don't know what happened, what someone went through. It's kind of like, that's your own little personal furnace that kind of directs you in whatever direction, or maybe it just melts you down, but there's no need. I think I'm going back to admiring the Irish ways of there's no need to share it. No one needs to know about your mother chasing you with butcher knives.
Yeah, I mean, again, not in a prurient way, but I do think it helps when you're trying to understand someone, either a friend or, like in this a kind of interview. I think it does. Again, it doesn't explain everything. I don't think you talk about your trauma and suddenly it's just, a key in a keyhole clicks and you're like, oh, finally. But it does explain how certain people get pushed in certain directions. And that's the part that I'm like curious about.
The one thing I would say is helpful. I mean, if you're going to talk about, not talking about like going into a career or that, but just in terms of going through that kind of insanity when you're a teenager or a kid is if other kids hear that, and that classic thing of like, it does get better, that, if you can just, I think when you're like, my sisters, I remembered reading about this 13-year-old who paid someone $60 to kill their stepfather who was abusive. And, my sister, so whenever my mother's acting up, my sisters and I were just like, $60, we need $60. But, and I've heard other stories like that of teens who think the only way out is to literally, kill a parent who's abusing them, and I don't mean necessarily sexually, but just being violent or whatever. And that I was almost at that point twice where I almost was pushed to being homicidal with my mother. And I think it's good maybe if young people just hear and know that, like, it seems like that's your whole world, but in around 5 or 6 years, you can get out of there and start your life.
Yeah.
But when you're that young, your family, I mean, we're just talking about in terms of parental pressure, in terms of like what you're going to do for a living. I mean, it's so all encompassing, that parental approval and that parental universe. You don't think there's any way out, And
I don't think a lot of people do escape that. Whatever their parents are,
right?
Because even the nicest parents, right? It's very difficult to escape from to get the escape velocity away from their planet.
I agree. I agree. I think even the nicest parents, like I mean, I know so many parents who try to be totally laissez-faire and hands off, but you can tell the kids are like jonesing for approval all the time. I think it's probably hardwired, Maybe it's not just nurture. Maybe it's just part of the evolutionary, relationship between child and parent.
Wait, I had one more question. Escape velocity.
Oh, see, you were going to be a physics.
Oh yeah. I won my 9th grade science fair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Is that true?
Yeah.
Really?
I did a experiment in chaos theory because I'd seen Jurassic Park and I wanted to be Jeff Goldblum.
Sure.
And so I got into chaos, and I ended up studying basically that it's nonlinear dynamics. I ended up studying that in grad school, like philosophy of nonlinear dynamics, and I actually think it's a fairly accurate way of how to understand societies or how anything very complex works. So I don't know. It's a weird theme in my life that started from Jurassic Park.
What is the philosophy of all that? I would think it would just be like shrugging your shoulders and going, what can you do? It's chaos. Isn't that it?
No. So the whole thing about with complexity theory
Let's get lunch.
is basically that in complex systems, and this is, again, the way I talk on the show, is like in complex systems, different kind of different, whether it's a physical thing, there'll be contradictions in the system that kind of hit against each other, and that causes thing like a clock with gears is a simple machine because one gear moves, turns another gear. You can kind of predict how it works, or you can easily predict how it works. But in complex things and complex machines or complex societies, you have a lot of contradictions, and in those contradictions, they create turbulence. Mm-hmm. And then the more pronounced those contradictions are, the more turbulence there is. And then that creates new things that you can't predict out of that turbulence because you don't know exactly how that turbulence is going to go.
Right. And you can't, I mean, isn't that why people try to kind of just go get microscopic with each one of those little offshoots of turbulence and try to analyze those separately?
Yeah. But then they can't figure out, but because there's so much turbulence, and as it gets more turbulent, you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
Which is what science is supposed to tell you. It's supposed to be like, and you can get broad patterns. Like the whole thing with complexity theory or nonlinear dynamics or whatever, that you can figure out patterns in things, but that's the best you're going to do for certain complex phenomena.
I guess, although maybe there is a simple explanation, but we're just too dumb to understand it yet. That's always my escape for everything. It's like, we're like dogs watching TV. We don't get it, because when you think about all the stuff science has figured out, where you know what I mean? Like 800 years ago, people would be like, they have no idea what causes you to get jaundice, and it's like, people turn yellow, but that was the chaos theory back then.
Mike, I forget what my last question was going to be.
I don't know. I'm just trying to deflect.
There was something really interesting in the way that you were talking about your parents, and now I totally lost.
Trying to get your parents' approval. That's what it all comes back to.
It all comes back to parents and anger, I think, in some way.
My mother used to, when I started doing stand-up, she's like, what are you doing stand-up for? She goes, you're terrible. You're not good. You should be a writer. You were always a good writer. You should be writing. So then, like 8 years later, I'm writing for a late night show. And part of my brain was like, oh, well, at least that crazy lady in New Jersey is going to be excited. And she'd be like, what are you writing for? You're a terrible writer. Stand up. That's what you were good at. You should be doing that. So she always kept me on my toes.
That's I've seen that in so many other people where it's just like you want this thing and you'll never get it. And some, like, even I think Maron's talked about how, like, he made showbiz his parents, right? Where it was just like, I want the approval from this amorphous thing. Right.
But don't you think once you talk about escape velocity, don't you think you get escape? If you realize you have one of those parents, like, oh, I have one of those parents who's never going to give it up. And don't you think that's part of the escape velocity, just understanding that once you're like, I don't know, hopefully the younger the better, and then just saying, okay, I have to just cut my parents out of what I'm doing.
Yes, if you're self-aware about it. And I think maybe you were more self-aware than I was as a kid because you had to be.
I did have to be. Like, I literally cut my mother. That helped. I cut my mother out of I had to cut her out of my life. The second I moved out of the house, like, I didn't invite her to my wedding. My sisters and she wasn't allowed near our children. I mean, she's really bad news. So that really eliminated the parental approval thing. Like, there was just literally no contact. So barely any contact. But wait, what were we talking about? I don't know. But so are your parents, like, do you still hear from them about what you're doing? Like, did they ever weigh in?
I think they did not want me to even be a philosophy professor. Oh. And I think they were, like, okay with it. And then the minute even having some kind of success, I still think they're not thrilled with this. They love Naomi. That's
hilarious.
Because they can see her on TV and they have it's how do I explain development to them, or how, they just don't.
Right. That's more palpable. That's more tangible to them.
Yeah. So I think finally in middle age, I am slowly getting away from needing their approval.
Oh yeah, you gotta. You're middle aged. You're not middle aged. Nice try. Middle age. You're a young punk.
I'll tell you. I'll end this just kind of where we started. But
okay,
what distracted me while I lost that question was my cat is behind where the computer started scratching, and I'm like, oh no, he's got fleas now.
I was just gonna say maybe your cat's the source. Do cats get fleas?
He's not yes, they do, but he's not an outdoor cat. So the vector is Mabel. So now I have to go look at Squee. But Mike, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
A ramshackle tour through your existential life.
Sorry, it was so ramshackle. It
was great.
The way it is.
It was great. I think the ramshackling was more on my end.
I think it was two ramshacklers getting together. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And good luck with the dog and the mites.
Thank you. I think they have poison.
Fleas. I meant fleas.
Yeah, they have poison in their blood, so it'll be fine. But still, until the fleas die, then it's just like, what's going on?
Yeah, no, I always relax when I know someone I love has poison in their blood. So you're in great shape.
All right.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
See you later. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. begin.